Welcome everyone. My name is Miles, and today's project is a bit different. I have schizophrenia and was diagnosed in my teen years. However, as far back as I can remember, I've experienced hallucinations, both auditory and visual. Today I'm going to be showing you some pieces that may have alluded to that before my diagnosis. Let's begin. I was once a Daisy Girl Scout. During this time I would go to meetings, had a vest with different badges and pins, and attended social events with other girls my age. It's in this book that we see the first few signs. Around the time that I was using this book, I was under 10 years of age. Here you can see a passage where they ask about my dreams. I believe they were inquiring as to dreams about what you'd like to be when you grow up, or where you'd like to see yourself in the future. But misunderstanding the prompt, I wrote, "I have dream friends," most likely alluding to the fact that I saw hallucinations, which I believed were part of my imagination and could come from my dreams. Throughout my years of being a schizophrenic, I've seen a lot of distortions in everyday life. This picture here, we were asked to draw our Girl Scout friends. For me, I drew them all huddled under some sort of awning, with strange devices hovering over them in the sky. While they're all smiling and seem carefree, I can't tell you what it is that's assaulting them from above. But if they were clouds, why would they be sectioned off into partitions with dots? I don't know. But I can only imagine what my young mind was trying to explain to the people around me. Next is a list we were prompted to make for class. I find this one interesting because I list some of my favorite things as cats, dogs, dolphin, but number 4 is scissors, even though I don't know how to spell it. I find this interesting because I have always had a very close relation with self-injurious behavior. It was one of the many methods I used to make the world around me all go quiet for a while. And even as a child, I'd always collected sharp objects. To know that I was so young that I couldn't even spell properly, yet listed them as one of the 4 things that were most important to me or my favorite in life, I find that very interesting. The second portion is where you see my limited perception of those around me. I'm supposed to list the differences between my favorite things and a friend's favorite things, but instead of finding different things for them, I simply list my own favorite things in a different order. The other reason I find this interesting is because I've replaced number 4, clearly understanding that my favorite thing, being the scissors, is not acceptable for another person. And while I did have friends at the time, I did spend marked time by myself with my hallucinations. So this leads me to believe that at the time, instead of going off and socializing, I may have just reordered my own ideas and then added something I thought was more acceptable. Another thing that I noted in the sketchbook I kept as a child is that a lot of my portraits were very distinct. I drew the same face repetitively with different garish, brightly colored adornments, wide open eyes, and a huge, almost unnatural smile. You can see that here with this blonde person and again in this photo as well. Then there's this picture. It was clearly one I'd drawn of myself and someone close to me, but I think it speaks more as to what was going on. You can see the larger figure reaching for the younger figure's hand, wearing a large smile and towering over the other figure. The smaller one, which I guess was my attempt to draw myself, is clearly leaning away, trying not to make contact with the larger figure. This reminds me a lot of when I would have tactile hallucinations, where I would feel bugs on my skin or crawling beneath my skin, and this made physical contact of any sort very uncomfortable. I was also very wary and paranoid of people, so I feel like this picture kind of depicts that distance between these 2 figures. Myself and someone I want to connect with but don't feel comfortable doing so. As an animal lover in these younger years, I drew a lot of animals in my sketchbook. I think this one was the most interesting though, because it seems like my attempt at some sort of dinosaur, but there are multiple eyes on its face. This was a small theme that went for a few years, where I saw facial distortions. I wonder if this is younger me transferring those distortions onto a hallucination and then drawing it in an attempt to show somebody what it was like. This, I believe, was a character from a movie I had watched as a child. I think the interesting part is that it made it into this sketchbook among a lot of brightly colored pictures of animals and was drawn with some similar features, but using only dark colors. In some way, this creature seems more normal than the strange faces I'd drawn previously. Whether this is a difference in perception of media and the real world, I can't say, but I found it interesting. Fast forwarding to my early teens, I kept a book where I wrote down some of the things that would happen to me, and I came across this. It's basically a map of my family's house. Only in this map you can see highlighted areas, and on the page beside this one, I give a detailed explanation of how these spaces are the ones where I can hear the voices most clearly. This was drawn as I was just approaching middle school. I thought I'd throw that in there as a final one, even though it was done around the time where I was being officially tested for a diagnosis, but found it interesting all the same that I had mapped spaces that were more susceptible to hearing voices. And interestingly enough, that my bedroom was one of these such places, because unfortunately, as I grew older, that's where I was trapped most of the time. Now, none of the earlier pictures are finite signs that I most certainly had schizophrenia as a child. That comes from family testimonies, observation, and years of outside help. So please don't think that by any means these are defining images that will tell you exactly that you have childhood schizophrenia. I just think it's interesting now that I know that I'm a schizophrenic, going back and looking at what my younger mind had created while it was dealing with these things and couldn't properly explain them to others. Given that I believed all of these instances were imagination and that everybody could see these things that grown-ups couldn't, I never thought that there was anything wrong with them up until my early teen years. There are also various photos of me during first grade and second grade in a school planner that I stumbled upon, where group photos are being taken, and yet you can see me distinctly looking either in the opposite direction of the other children or down at the opposite corner. So I found that pretty interesting as well. That being said, I hope that you've enjoyed this project as I've shared a bit of my art from my younger years. Once again, this is not something to base a diagnosis off of, but if you do have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll answer them each personally. Alright guys, I love you all and stay awesome. Bye.